Hello. Hi. For those of you who are new here, or for those of you who have been around for a while, I'm Hillary, aka Hills Alive. I'm a Song of Ice and Fire YouTuber. I cover a lot of stuff like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, etc. And I'm here to react to the first season of House of the Dragon. Obviously, given my YouTube channel, I have already watched House of the Dragon before, but it's been a while. And again, for those of you who don't know or might not know, I have a degree in film criticism. So even though I've already seen it before, I think there's some input and info that I could add to the series that would be interesting. Also, there are, certain segments of the episodes that I think have little interesting plot threads or points of inspiration that I like, but that I don't think are really worth making their own video about. So I can, just discuss them as we both watch House of the Dragon. So now that we've got past that whole intro thing, why don't we watch the pilot episode of House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 1, The Heirs of the Dragon.
As the first century of the Targaryen dynasty came to a close, the health of the old king, Jaehaerys, was failing. King Jaehaerys reigned over nearly 60 years of peace and prosperity, but tragedy had claimed both his sons. So, in the year 101, the old king called a great council to choose an heir. Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, the king's eldest descendant, and her younger cousin, Prince Viserys Targaryen, the king's eldest male descendant.
Declared by all lords paramount, the Prince Viserys Targaryen be made Prince of Dragonstone.
Rhaenys, a woman, would not inherit the Iron Throne. Jaehaerys called the Great Council to prevent a war being fought over his succession. For he knew the cold truth. The only thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon was itself.
Not technically true, given that Robert's Rebellion did tear down House Targaryen, but I guess that maybe applies to at least when the Targaryens still had their dragons. So obviously they included this title card for the sake of connecting House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones, but I was a little thrown off by the fact that they included this at all, given how Game of Thrones ended. I get that obviously that's a really clear connective point between the two storylines, but this seems like the kind of thing that you would not. It doesn't seem like a very exciting place to start. I do have to say, even though I'm still a little iffy on the whole, switching things up to make Alicent and Rhaenyra best friends, from a actual television production standpoint, that obviously makes things 1,000 times easier and makes it much easier to streamline their storylines and keep everything sort of on one single track instead of having to expand their storytelling into majorly divergent directions from the very start of the story.
How long? I don't need mothering, Rhaenyra.
Well, here you are, surrounded by attendants, all focused on the babe. Someone has to attend to you.
You will lie in this bed soon enough, Rhaenyra. This discomfort is how we serve the realm.
That's a really interesting aspect of Rhaenyra's perspective that I don't think that I really caught on the first viewing. The fact that she is showing concern for her mother obviously makes sense, but it's interesting to look at that, how that point of view sort of carries itself forward with Rhaenyra's children and how she treats them.
We have royal wounds, you and I. The childbed is our battlefield.
Your Grace, at Prince Daemon's urging, the Crown has invested significant capital in the retraining and re-equipping of his city watch. I thought you might urge your brother to fill his seat on the council and provide an assessment of his progress as commander of the watch.
I would urge that you not allow this triarchy much latitude in the stepstones, Your Grace. If those shipping lanes should fall, it will beggar our ports.
The Crown has heard your report, Lord Corlys, and takes it under advisement.
Cost of the tournament is not negligible. Perhaps we might delay until the child is in hand.
Most
Facts.
of the lords and knights are certainly on their way to King's Landing already to turn them back
The
down.
tourney will take the better part of a week.
I mean, he's not wrong. But he is wrong. Ugh. Stop it. I wonder why they specifically mentioned Dark Sister. Ugh. Stop it. Ugh. I hate it. Blech. Ugh, I hate him already. Hate him already. Rude.
Can you say yet what it is?
Ugh.
Today, we're searching the text for similar cases. It's a small cut from sitting the throne. It's nothing.
I love that, like, in the entire history of the Targaryen dynasty, all of this stuff kept on happening. And they never were just like, hey, why don't we make the throne a safer place to sit?
Rhaenyra has already declared that she's the sister.
Really?
She even named her
Dare I ask?
Visenya. Because the dragon
The curse name.
reminded her of Vago.
God be good.
The dream was clearer than a memory. Our son was born wearing Aegon's iron crown. And I heard the sound of thundering hooves, splintering shields and ringing swords. And I placed our son upon the Iron Throne. As the bells of the Grand Set tolled, and all the dragons roared as one.
Again, totally forgot this scene, but very obviously a prophecy of what is going to happen and that it's all terrible sounding things. I really love the sound design here. Ugh.
Commander on the floor!
Now, you're a pack of hounds. Satan hunted. Hound for the hunt.
You don't really want to be a hound in the world of Ice and Fire, generally. Oh my god. Ugh. Oh my god. Ugh. It's like a little unnecessary. Ugh. Jesus. Like, in case you were wondering if this was going to be as violent as Game of Thrones, here's a nice pile of parts. And I'm sure you're the one to fix it, bro. Like, really? Oh my god. Yeah, she should be. Honestly, like, so much lies. Hmm. I know that one of the producers mentioned that they were disappointed by the similar scene in Game of Thrones, its first season. And I do really like that I thought they did a really good job of making the shots here really dynamic and making it feel very impactful. I feel like in Game of Thrones, sometimes it was a little hard to believe that someone would be killed during a joust like this, but this is really makes it look like the extreme sport that it kind of is. As someone who knows absolutely nothing about helmets, old-fashioned armor, things of that ilk, seems like those wings would be kind of a hazard, kind of dangerous, maybe for Daemon as well as the people around him. The High Tower in green. Daemon be trying. Lord Beesbury, you shady bitch. I get like keeping your armor on theme and whatever, but again, it seems like the helmet on Gwaine is really a safety hazard. Oh my god. What freaking scrub behavior. If I wasn't already on House Hightower's side, why would I not be? Daemon's being a dick. Dad does not approve. Oh, God. Obviously, I knew what was going to happen going into this, but I was really surprised that they went like full-on birth horror from the jump, from the very first episode. Jesus. It's like a slight overreaction. Ugh. Valid question.
Their lord sent them to the tourney field with fists full of steel and balls full of seed.
Ew.
With honor and grace. It's a marvel that war didn't break out of first blood.
Oh my god. Ugh. Dude, same.
is a chance that we can save the child. The technique is...
Well, like, obviously it's not an impossible choice if those are the choices, right?
infant, but there is nothing clever.
You can save the child.
See, I felt like this was a really impressive introduction to Viserys. I thought this was a pretty bold move to take, like, right off the bat, to introduce him in the pilot as someone with this level of ruthlessness. I know that I've seen a lot of people point out that, you know, basically, and it is true, that he had only one valid choice. But the fact that he turns around to this choice so quickly, and he does it without telling Emma what's happening or telling her, you know, giving her a choice, giving her the opportunity to say goodbye to Rhaenyra, that is what makes it feel very villainous, and makes it very obvious that Viserys is extremely super duper desperate to have a son no matter what. And more importantly, that he believes that he is going to have a son no matter what. So even if he has to kill his own wife to get that, he will.
Call will now tilt against Sir Daemon Targaryen, Prince of the City.
This feels very relevant to Nepo baby discourse. And that's one of the reasons I like Sir Criston so much, is because he's really the only significant character who wasn't born at the very super duper top of Westerosi society, but managed to work his way up anyway. Also interesting that they have Criston on a white horse and Daemon on a black horse. Just like imagine this happening to you without warning. I feel so bad for her. Do you though? Ugh. Is it really not? But okay. Oh God. The notion that they're not trying to introduce Viserys as an at least somewhat villainous character is beyond belief. Like, you don't make a scene that protracted and that over the top if you're not trying to make it clear what kind of a character would do this. Oh my God, throw a tantrum, guy. Oh, Loki, if Criston beats him with a Valyrian sword, that's fucking iconic. Is he using Dark Sister right now? I'm not sure. Kick his ass, Seabass. Ugh. Oh my God. Oh. Loki, I feel like that validates Rhaenyra's desire to be queen more than almost anything else. Like, simply avoiding being cut open and ripped apart by your husband is a pretty valid reason to not want to let anyone else rule besides you. Ugh. Ugh. Oh my God, Petty Betty. Again, wish they had gone into a deeper explanation of that and like the racial dynamics of being Dornish, especially in Westeros at this time, and being, you know, at the Targaryen court. kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. You're so gross. Oh my god. Why did they make him and Damon seem so awful in the first episode? Honestly, like, what kind of cuts were they doing that she bled that much, though? You'd think the Maesters would at least have enough of an idea of where, like, blood vessels and arteries are to not have her dumping 2 gallons of blood all across the room. Go away! Is that the first time that they say Dracarys in this series? Because if it is, that's, you know, kind of an interesting parallel to, obviously, Dany's most, like, iconic line and the way that she uses it. It's definitely a stark contrast to Rhaenyra's burning her mother and brother's bodies.
I named Damon Master of Laws, but you said he was a tyrant.
Was he wrong?
Coin, you said he was a spendthrift.
Was he wrong? Was he wrong, though?
The City Watch was your solution.
A half measure, Your Grace. The truth is, Damon should be far away from this court.
Facts.
My blood. What are you saying? My brother would murder me. Take my crown. Are you?
I mean, probably not, because you're, like, the only person on planet Earth that he likes, but literally everyone else, yes. He would kill.
Take a man who lacks the patience for absolute power, Your Grace. The king's firstborn child.
A girl. No queen has ever sat the Iron Throne.
That is only by tradition and precedent,
If order and stability so concerns this council, then perhaps we shouldn't break 100 years of it by naming a girl heir.
So, again, I know that I've repeated myself on this in videos before, like a bajillion times, but this is a really good scene that illustrates how bizarre it is for Rhaenyra to be named the heir, or the idea of a female heir. Obviously, that's completely unfair bullshit, but even among the highest lords of the realm, it doesn't even occur to them that Rhaenyra could be Viserys' successor rather than Daemon until this meeting, obviously. And even then, they're like, dude, you're fucking crazy.
Or worse, the king and the realm from him.
Who, like, built that wall? Why would you want to have holes in the wall where the Great Council meets? Okay.
The queen who never was.
Rhaenys was the only child of Jaehaerys' eldest son. She had a strong claim at the Great Council.
But again, he's not wrong either. Because of you.
Suffer crows that come to feast on their corpses.
A feast for crows. That chandelier is wild. That is very cool looking. How do you think? Ugh. Honestly, like, Men of Westeros not being scrubs. Challenge failed. Pilot episode. Thank you. I like the 7-pointed star detail and the relationship with the Maester. That's a nice subtle indication of, like, the powers that the High Towers hold, and their obviously deep connections to Old Town and all of the major institutions in Westeros outside of the crown. Totally did not notice this the first time around either, but her dress is, like, super duper sheer. There is a lot of sheerness going on there. Gross, gross. And obviously feels fairly relevant that she was covering herself with the book. Alicent has done nothing wrong, ever, in her life. Who is lighting these chandeliers? It's a dark omen. Foreshadowing. I think a lot of stuff brought Valeria's doom. Yeah, except you didn't believe that like 4 days ago. God, I'm sorry, but Caraxes is so ugly. Look at his little worm body. Blech. Right. He conquered an entire continent for the good of the continent. Very Manifest Destiny vibes.
Stand against it. It's been passed from king to heir since Aegon's time.
Which seems like a bad idea. For obvious reasons. You don't keep the apocalyptic prophecy a secret and only tell one person. Okay, so that is a wrap on House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 1, The Heirs of the Dragon. As far as pilots go, I think that this was a pretty solid one. Pilots for TV series have a tendency to be kind of strange. I think that's just sort of a part of an aspect of the production process. It's never going to not be weird because you're making an episode that's very separate from the rest of the series. And in addition to that, there's also obviously a lot of information. You have to introduce a lot of characters that need to become familiar to the audience, and not just familiar, but need to be interesting enough that people will want to come back for another episode, or preferably for an entire series. Obviously, House of the Dragon had an advantage being a spin-off of Game of Thrones, meaning that the Targaryens were familiar. It was a familiar imaginary world. There are a lot of aspects of it that meant that the audience came into the situation with a body of knowledge that normally they wouldn't have in any other TV circumstance. But given that there have been other spin-offs of Game of Thrones that were 2 thumbs down, it's still impressive that they managed to make something that felt cohesive and felt like a good introduction to the characters and the story, and reintroducing us to the world of King's Landing in a different time than Game of Thrones. In retrospect, there were some aspects of this that actually really surprised me. I think the most surprising thing was how off-putting Daemon was from the very start. Like, I really didn't expect... I assumed that I was put off by him at first just because of, like, my general bias against him and his actions and decisions. But I think that they really went hard on making him, like, the creepiest weirdo ever. And I was kind of living for it. I don't know if that was intentional to actually villainize Daemon and, to a lesser extent, Viserys and even Otto from the start. Like, I don't know if they wanted the audience to dislike them as characters, or if they went so hard in the beginning because they wanted to establish that this was going to be just as brutal and harsh and shocking as Game of Thrones was. Certain aspects of it, like the moment where Daemon was piling the parts into the wagon, that definitely felt like it was kind of shoehorned in there to establish, like, oh, look at how gruesome and horrifying this is going to be. If you loved Game of Thrones, you're not going to be disappointed. But things with, like, the way Viserys treated Emma, I felt like that was definitely a bit more nuanced. They really, again, like I said, as I was watching it, like, you don't normally put that kind of a scene into a movie or a TV show unless you're really trying to hit something home for the audience. And I think it was to hit home the brutality of this act, and that that Viserys was a fairly selfish person, and that his obsession with with Aegon's prophecy really led him to do things that were kind of crazy. I thought that, it was a solid introduction to the characters, but I felt like Rhaenyra and Alicent were actually kind of the weak spots of the pilot episode, which is unfortunate given that, obviously they're supposed to be the lead characters. They're also teenage girls, so there's only so much kind of pathos you can develop for two teenage girls in the span of an hour. But in terms of, like, getting a solid understanding of their characters or their motivations or where they were going, I felt like it was very kind of, they fit into certain character archetypes that they didn't move beyond. I feel like, I got that Rhaenyra was supposed to be the kind of, like, badass, rebellious girl, and Alicent was kind of the shy, obedient girl, but I didn't feel like there was much more to it than that, which, again, given that they're essentially the main characters of the story, is a little bit of a weak point in terms of the writing. Obviously, I think Patty Slade, Sean Brooke, I assume is how you say it, Slade, Rhys Ifans, Slade, and unfortunately, Matt Smith also Slade, even though he was the grossest of gross. I wish we had seen a little bit more of Kristen Cole in the beginning, but, ultimately it's not that relevant to the introduction of the story. Obviously, the Targaryens and the dragons are supposed to be the stars at this moment in time. Oh yeah, I thought that they did a really good job of establishing how unusual Rhaenyra being named heir was. Based on the fandom reaction overall, I kind of expected, like, going back and looking at it again, that would be one of the weaker points of the storytelling, because so many people seem to think that there's no real issue, that Viserys named her heir and that's it. But the pilot did a really good job, a surprisingly good job, again, in retrospect, establishing that this is a massive break from the norms of Westeros and from the norms of the Targaryen dynasty. So I thought that was a very good way of laying the groundwork for what's to come, even though I don't think that the audience picked up on it maybe as much as they were trying to sell it, just because obviously, coming from Game of Thrones, most people watching were primed to think, okay, well, if Rhaenyra is is this era's Daenerys, then obviously she's the one who is meant to be the queen. And I thought that they did a very good job of kind of establishing why the Dance of the Dragons ultimately winds up happening. Because it really is an exceptional departure from the standards and norms of Westerosi society. I feel like the introduction of Aegon's prophecy was really, like, the most controversial point of the pilot episode for a lot of people, and I generally do agree with that. I do kind of, even at this point, I'm very like iffy on how much I like that, if I think it's going to contribute to the story at all. Again, like I said, as I was watching, it's very kind of like Manifest Destiny vibes, which to me, it seems like an obvious clue that, this, the Targaryens as a whole are more villainous than most people tend to interpret them as, based on the shows alone. But I don't think, I feel like that may have been a bit too subtle to expect the audience to pick up on, especially if we're presuming that everyone is only going to be watching this once or twice. I thought there was definitely some subtext that I missed the first time, or that I forgot about in the time since I watched it last, which was at least a year ago. Again, I thought Rhaenyra's connection with her mom was a strong point and was one of the few things in the episode that I felt like really presented an aspect. It gave Rhaenyra a good driving force behind a lot of her decisions, beyond just wanting to rule because she was told that she could rule. Similarly, I'm kind of, again, still on the fence about making Alicent and Rhaenyra best friends. Obviously, that's a significant departure from the books. And from an actual TV production standpoint, that obviously is much smarter. That consolidates the two biggest portions of the storyline, especially in season 1, and allows them to put a ton of stuff together that normally you would have to address with two separate shooting crews, potentially locations, actors. And obviously, again, if you're creating something that has to be accessible to a broader audience, it's much easier. As much as I've criticized Game of Thrones and even House of the Dragon in the past for cutting certain characters, again, from a TV production standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, because if you're creating a show that has to be comprehensible to people who have zero familiarity with the books, having 1,000 different characters doing different things, playing different roles, makes it a lot more difficult to follow and makes it much less likely that people are going to continue to watch. Oh, right, yeah. And so the whole thing with Aegon's prophecy and Aegon's conquest, although I'm still up in the air on how much I like that being incorporated into the story, that was another aspect that obviously created a really strong motivation for Viserys and for Rhaenyra. In terms of setting up a further storyline, it definitely adds a different dimension to not only have Rhaenyra be declared the rightful heir, but for Viserys and Rhaenyra to presumably believe that the future of the world literally depends on Rhaenyra becoming queen. That makes Viserys's reluctance to change his mind and Rhaenyra's reluctance to give up the throne or her claim to the throne make a lot more sense. So yeah, overall, I thought, honestly, it was a better pilot than I remember it being. There were certainly some strong points that I missed the first time around. I thought that it definitely connected the entire season together in a way that really worked well. Again, you can kind of, even from the very start, see where the foundation of the future conflict is building, and that's definitely a good starting point for a series. Given how much information they had to throw into the pilot, it was a good one. And even beyond the appeal of the Targaryens, I'm not surprised that HBO decided that this was the first Game of Thrones spinoff that they wanted to pick up, because it really does serve in all the ways that it needs to. So yeah, that is my general review and retrospective on the pilot episode of House of the Dragon. So if you're interested in more content like this, I will be reviewing the rest of season 1, and obviously we'll be reacting to season 2 when it comes up in the next couple of weeks. So I hope you enjoy, and like and subscribe.